The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. Well, joining us now on the program, let's talk about what's happening in the fertilizer markets as we close out November and head into the month of December. Getting into that colder time frame, snow starting to fly in some areas. Probably going to put a halt on some of that late season fall application and more. But of course, we got a lot of things to watch as we get into next spring, logistics, geopolitics, and more. Let's talk about it. Joining us now, StoneX VP of Fertilizer, Josh Linville. Josh, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'll be a lot better when I get home later on today and I find my stretchy pants. Listen, Thanksgiving is not Thanksgiving unless I got something that can expand on the waistline.
I'm right there with you. Turkey, stuffing, green bean, casserole, potatoes, you name it. Always. I think Thanksgiving has become my favorite holiday because it's a food day for me most of the time.
This is the one competition I actually like training for, and I'm ready this year. I might go all state. I'm not sure yet, man.
Hey, I'll see if I can join the all-state team with you on that one. We'll see what we can do if we can be there together. Hey, thanks for joining us. Let's talk fertilizer here a little bit. Obviously, there's been plenty of news headlines, I would say, that are worth watching here in the fertilizer market. The talk of tariffs, of course, that's a big issue here. That's been brought up this week by President-elect Trump. Canada, Mexico, China, seeing responses from officials from those three countries. How would those potential tariffs that are being talked about, how would that impact the fertilizer markets, Josh?
I'll tell you what, it's still fresh enough. We're still trying to wrap our heads around. I mean, you start thinking about what could the new Trump administration look like and what could he go after? And you automatically start thinking Russia and China and all these different places around the world. I can tell you, I didn't have Canada in my top 20 list. So you start kind of stepping back and like, all right, let's think about this from a fundamental standpoint. Let's say these tariffs are put in place, which I think it's a negotiation tool. I don't think we'll actually see them, but in case that they are, well, what are we looking at? And when we start looking at that, obviously, most of our potash comes from Canada. They rely on the U.S. to actually export a lot of product. We get a lot of our stuff from there. And I don't know that there's a lot of demand around the rest of the world that they could say, fine, U.S., if you don't want to charge this duty, we just won't send it to you. I don't think they've got that capability. So that could impact the potash market. I think that would probably be more of a manufacturer paying it than it would be a U.S. farmer. But obviously, we're both going to get hosed on this deal. Nitrogen, there's a lot. There's over 1 million tons of anhydrous that flows from Canada into the U.S. every year. And again, I think this production is more landlocked. I don't think they've got a lot of extra options out there. So there's going to be a little bit of a split on that side. Phosphate, it's more of just we move product up into Canada. That's not going to be something that's hit. Urea, there's a share there. The eastern side of Canada and the U.S., we shove tons up into Canada. On the western side, they produce and they shove down into the U.S., the PNW, California markets. So each one is going to be a little bit differently, but yeah, it's going to be something that affects, I would say potash and nitrogen mostly. Like I said, phosphate's a little bit different just because we ship product there. But I'm really hoping this isn't a story we have to keep talking about because you start going beyond the borders of fertilizer and it gets dicey.
Very true. Think about, more broadly too with the Russia-Ukraine war. If that continues to escalate, I mean, you start throwing in other geopolitical issues around the world, and that could have some pretty broad impacts on just global fertilizer supply and demand, right, Josh?
Absolutely. And we're already dealing with, you look at the global nitrogen market, it's already much tighter than it normally would be for this year. We've got Chinese urea exports, normally over 5 million ton a year. Through January through October total, 257,000 ton this year. That's a massive hole. The European sector is still dealing with high natural gas prices. Their production rate's at 75%. So that's about 2.5–3 million ton of urea removed. That's 2 million ton of UAN removed. Russia still isn't exporting anhydrous, and they were typically over 4 million ton. There are a lot of supply issues already in place on nitrogen that really has us on that KG. I think we could start seeing things break higher as we move to Q1. You start throwing in some of these, these war escalations like between Russia and Ukraine. If China decides finally we're just going to go after Taiwan, I mean, in the Middle East, all these things are huge events that could happen. You don't place them into your forecast, your point of view, but you certainly have them as watch points. And if any of those trigger, it's going to be hurtful.
Very true. Very true. We're talking with Josh Linville, VP of Fertilizer at StoneX. Josh, I know with the way the weather's been changing quickly in many areas, that's had an impact on some of our fall anhydrous application, things like that. Talk about just weather-wise, what we've been seeing and where we're going from here as we roll into December when it comes to fall application.
This fall has been extremely poor, and it looks even worse when we compare it to last year. Last fall was probably one of the best we've ever had, and it will be the highlight that we point back to and say, boy, if we could have that every year, that'd be phenomenal. We had harvest out of the way, soil temperatures dropped, we had adequate moisture, and we went in November and we went off December. We did everything we wanted to do. This year, incredibly dry through October, and then late October started to rain, and it just kept raining. Most of the areas across the Midwest where the bulk of that fall anhydrous run has just been too wet to go until very late last week. And even then, it's a little picky choosy on where you're going to go. Man, I'm looking at the radar right now. There's a little bit of rain system moving through the Midwest. And this time of year, a little bit of rain goes a long way. I will say, middle of last week, our anhydrous run expectation for North America was probably 25-35% of normal. We are making up ground. Farmers, retailers do a phenomenal job in a very tight window. But if we get a rain today, if we get more rain or snow over the weekend, that could be it. And we're going to have a very big shortfall and a hard conversation to have about spring.
Absolutely. Well, and I was going to ask too, just from a pricing standpoint, some final thoughts there. I mean, with the weather factor thrown in and everything else we've been talking about, what are you going to be watching here as we roll through the remainder of the year in terms of price action?
For nitrogen, for me, I'm still leaning on the higher side. There's enough supply issues around the world that can start dragging those price ideas higher once the demand returns. We will move with them. We are not on an island. We are not our own marketplace. We are part of the world stage. So if the global prices start to go higher on nitrogen, we will follow suit. There's, of course, some things that we're watching that could cause that thing to dip down. Not saying there isn't, but right now we're leaning more towards the higher side. Phosphate is already incredibly tight, but it's already incredibly high priced as well. If you look at our current phosphate value versus grain, today for November, December, for this part of the calendar, it's some of the worst ratios, some of the worst values we've ever seen. And I'm not saying recent years. I'm not talking half decade. I am saying ever. So it really makes you question how much higher can that go? How much more pain can be taken? Potash, listen, I think it's steady. Yeah, we could see some production cuts here and there, but it's a very well supplied marketplace. Just really hard to see any appreciation there.
Josh, anything final you'd add for folks or reiterate to them today?
Be careful. The American farmer is being asked to do a stupid amount of big work in a very short window. That desire to run 24/7 until it rains is going to be there. And a lot of you guys are going to push it, and you should. And I get it. It's your operation. That's your livelihood. I'm not saying don't do it, but be careful. Don't push too hard. Don't get so tired you fall asleep at the wheel and you end up in a ditch. It's bad enough you're putting on dry. If you're dragging an anhydrous trailer, you're not talking about just spilling a cart or maybe banging yourself up. You start rupturing hoses, you're lucky if you get away. Be careful. I know the art market is asking a lot of you this year. Get home, get safe. Your friends and family want to see you.
Great thoughts to wrap up here, and we appreciate the time. Josh Linville, VP of Fertilizer at StoneX. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. We'll talk to you again soon, my friend.
You too.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. There, you can watch our latest interviews with the top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. Just go to youtube.com/markettalkag and hit the subscribe button, or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.